Hello everyone and welcome to Preferred Selection. Today we're going to be looking at an EDH deck idea. I've been wanting to do a video like this for a while and I've been waiting to have an idea for a deck before I recorded my deck building process. And I found a card that has caught my eye and I think it's time to build a deck. So the card in question is Mass Polymorph. And what does that do? Mass Polymorph exiles all the creatures that we control, and we search our library for the same number of creatures and we put them onto the battlefield. So if you have a bunch of creatures out, you exile them, and let's say it's 7, you go through your deck until you get 7 guys, you put them onto the battlefield. Now immediately, some of you who've played for a while can see how that could be abusable because things like tokens exist, and you can build a deck that has all sorts of cards that make creatures but aren't actually creatures, putting very few real creatures in your deck and allowing you to do all sorts of crazy things with putting, giant creatures in play, or creatures that make infinite mana, creatures that kill the opponent instantly. There are a lot of options with a card like this. And in exploring that, I thought, okay, this is a cool card. What do I want to do with it? Do I want a combo kill, or do I just want to kind of play a friendlier game where maybe I just have kind of like a living death, living end sort of, just dump a bunch of big scary things onto the table. With just dumping a bunch of big scary creatures, you run the risk that you just get wrathed. So that's something to consider. It just kind of depends on your play group, what you want to do. For me, I decided, I've got a combo deck already. I don't need another one. That said, what did I actually do? What do I do when I build a deck? Well, there's things I do structurally when I build a deck, and then there's things that just occur to me. So the first thing I did structurally with this deck is I thought about what general do I want to play, and there are a few contenders. One of the first contenders was Sliver Queen. I thought about this for a while. This would have been the more unfair version. It would have played cards like Tooth and Nail. It would have played the Kiki Jiki Deceiver Exarch Infinite Damage combo. For those not familiar, this creates infinite creatures, these two creatures together. They create infinite Deceiver Exarchs that have haste and can attack and deal infinite damage. That's not the direction I went, though, because come on, guys, go back down there. Because I don't need another. I actually do play a Sliver Queen deck, and I didn't really feel like I needed to go down that route this time. I've got a deck that I can play when like the really competitive friends of mine get together, and I don't need like 4 hyper competitive decks because it just get old. Another general I thought about was Una, and I thought about Una because I was just thinking, like, okay, in these colors, what actually produces tokens? What generals produce tokens? Because obviously the advantage of having a general that makes tokens is I don't have to play a bunch of token makers. I can just have my general do that work. So Una is appealing because it does that. But there's a lot of problems with Una. The first problem with Una is 6 mana is a lot. That means that and she doesn't make tokens when she enters the battlefield. She makes tokens when she uses an ability. And the ability costs mana. So 6 mana to play her. You activate her the next turn to hopefully get some tokens. And then you cast Mass Polymorph the turn after that. It just seemed like a lot of work to be Mass Polymorphing on like turn 8. And I also don't like the fact that she's only blue-black, which means we'd be limited to blue-black cards, which means playing two colors that people are kind of they have a stigma to them. You don't have to play like a control deck with these colors, but that's what people would be expecting. Is they'd be expecting a lot of counter spells, a lot of tutors, a lot of like scary consistency. And Una especially frightens people because Una was a prominent creature when the Commander format first rose to popularity in like 2008, and people remember Una for being a really powerful creature that she no longer really fills that role. She's not one of the scarier generals anymore, but people don't like her, and you'll be targeted if you play her. So what we're going to do is we want to fly under the radar a little bit, which led me to settle on Sidri Galvanic Genius. This is a card I'm not super familiar with. I don't know very much about the newer precons. I bought 2 of them. I played them. I was kind of shocked at how many cards were like big in like Ravnica and Alara Limited that I don't really feel like deserve to be in an EDH deck that were in these decks. I also thought the generals were weaker than I'd expect, but we can use that to our advantage because since these cards are not necessarily feared, they go under the radar a little bit, as I said. And if we drop Sidri on the table as our general, people aren't going to be like, "Oh, big man, Sidri." You know, they're not going to be too worried. Hopefully, some people are afraid of Esper colors, so who knows. When I do want to say it's not entirely a negative thing that the new commander decks didn't generate the scariest creatures ever, the scariest generals ever, because I honestly don't want like 6 or 7 new top tier 1 generals to come out every time new commander product launches, because then that it takes a long time to generate cards like Mimeoplasm and Animar and Riku and Edric, and I wouldn't want new versions of those topping each other every 2 years. That'd be crazy. So I'm okay with this card existing. Let's read it before we get too ahead of ourselves. So what this does is you pay a blue mana and you can turn a non-creature artifact into an artifact creature with power and toughness equal to its casting cost until end of turn. You can pay an additional 2 mana to give a creature Death Touch and Lifelink until end of turn. So I think what this general's intention was to be kind of like a turn your utility artifacts into aggressive creatures and attack people sort of a thing. It's a little bit mana prohibitive and kind of a strange EDH strategy, but it's a cool card nonetheless. It costs 3, which means we can cast it. I like EDH generals that we can actually cast. In addition to being castable, the first ability is kind of cool because it doesn't have to target our own guys, which means we can use this card for a little bit of disruption. And cards that we can use as disruption in addition to their normal functions, they're good. Like we can, let's say we have a card like, for example, where did it go? Let's say we have a card like Evacuation, or return all creatures to the owner's hands. If we have the extra mana, we can use Sidri a couple times to, bounce our opponents, Gilded Lotus and Birthing Pod, and set them back a little bit. So that's kind of cool. And obviously the reason we're playing the general is because that blue ability lets us turn our artifacts into creatures, letting us mass polymorph away our artifacts. So, we're giving up, when at that point we're giving up some signets to get big creatures, and hopefully it's worth it. So, okay, so that said, choosing generals was like the first thing that I went through as part of my structured process, but part of my organic flow of thought process, the real first thing I thought of when I was building this deck was, I want to play with Demonic Tutor. Demonic Tutor is so good, and it gives us an out against decks where we need to draw just one card, and it also gives us it gives us a way to go get Mass Polymorph. And if I'm going to build a deck in a singleton format based around one card, I want to be able to go get that card, because otherwise I might play 20 games of EDH and never actually get to go off. So, okay, so that said, we have our general, we have a couple cards. What do we do from there? The first thing I like to do normally is figure out kind of the auto includes for Magic for an EDH deck. And in this case, I ask myself a series of questions, and the first question was, okay, with Sidri, we want to play a bunch of mana rocks. What are the 2 mana rocks that we can cast? And I came up with a not a comprehensive list, but I came up with enough that we have 8 2 mana artifacts. That means we'll see one in more opening hands than we don't. About 65% of the time, I think. That's pretty good. And from there, I started working on the mana base. And the mana base was pretty simple because there's a lot of ways we could go with it. We would gain a lot if we could get the lands down to 1 or 2 basics, especially 1 basic split between a snow and a non-snow basic. What I'm saying is we would want every card in the deck to have a unique name. If every card in your deck has a unique name, you can play a tutor called Tainted Pact, and Tainted Pact will just give you another demonic tutor. We couldn't quite do that because this is budget. It's not quite budget. You can see I've got Marsh Flats in here. I threw that in because, if you have fetches from your collection, play them. I don't normally play EDH on MTGO because it's terrible. The format's like the literal formatting, like your screen quarters. It's very strange. I play on paper, so you might notice that I don't own most of these cards. I do own. I think I own every single thing in this deck on paper, and I will be playing this deck like when I go to shops and places, and trying it out. But anyway, that's an aside. Just build the mana base that you can afford. I put in 38 lands. I think that's enough with our artifacts. The next category that I went into was sticking with the theme of auto includes. What are the mana rocks that aren't 2 mana that I know we're playing? I know we're playing Soul Ring. I know we're playing Mana Vault. I know we're playing Coalition Relic and Gilded Lotus. Like, those are just good enough that we're putting them in there no matter what. Gilded Lotus is nicely expensive enough that with our general we can maybe use it to beat down. I don't think we'd ever want to do that, but it's an option. Then the auto-include card draw. Never build a blue EDH deck without Ponder, Preordain, and Brainstorm. Just your opening hand will thank you. Brainstorm's not really an opening hand card, but it's still, you play it no matter what. In this deck, you'd also probably want to play Scroll Rack, but I just didn't think of it. Play Scroll Rack in almost everything, too. But I didn't think of it in time, so maybe add it in later. This deck's also... from the auto includes, I'm kind of done with the auto includes now and thinking about what do I want to use for disruption. And in the disruption department, I went with Cyclonic Rift, Remand, Evacuation, and Dismiss. They seem like a fine set. Like, Cyclonic Rift is basically, these are borderline auto includes. They're very, very good cards. And I suggest running them. They're amazing. I don't know if amazing is the right word, but Cyclonic Rift is at least amazing. From there we go into tutors. Most of these cards are tutors, or at least conditional tutors. Merchant Scroll can go get our I don't know. It can go get a few things in our deck. It's borderline good enough to be in here. Vampiric Tutor go gets our win condition. Limdale's Vault probably goes and gets our win condition. Mystical Tutor can go get our win condition. Teachings is just okay, but it's a good value card. Expedition Map, you'll see what that gets in a second. It's very useful in this deck. It's useful in most decks, but you'll see why I put it in here. Oh, and before I forget, I actually want to talk about one more thing with a mana base. So our general can do things with artifacts, so it might make sense to play all 3 of the Merodian artifact lands. I'm not playing all 3 because, like, Vault of Whispers and Ancient Den and Seat of Synod, if you're playing 3 of those and your opening hand is like Seat and Ancient Den and Dimir Signet, you're cold to artifact destruction. I don't want my lands to be totally cold to artifact destruction. I don't want to just die. So I'm only playing one. I'd probably rather play 0, to be honest, but I'm trying 1 in there just to kind of try it out. All right, so from this point in the deck, my thought is, what are the good cards that do dual roles in this deck, that do more than one thing? And an example of doing more than one thing is like Entreat the Angels. Entreat the Angels makes tokens. It's a token maker for our for Mass Polymorph, but it happens to make 4/4 flyers, which are good enough that we could just straight up win the game with this card. Like if we cast it and make 5 flyers, we could just attack and then win. Bribery, Blatant Thievery fall under the same category. Right of Replication definitely falls into the same category of token maker that just wins you the game. Martial Coup is it's not a game winner, but it's a Wrath of God that makes tokens, which is great for us because of what our deck does. And something like Desertion. It's a counter spell that gives us a creature to polymorph away, or maybe just like maybe it gives us our opponent's best creature and we just win. After the multi-roll guys, we get into I guess kind of like a 3-mana artifact category, where I just thought about, all right, we've added some artifacts in. I want some things here. I'd be playing Grim Monolith here, except I didn't. I don't know why. But here's, Grim's only 2, but these cards just made me think of it. We don't need like a ton of like big mana XL in this deck, but it doesn't hurt to have a little bit. From here we get into kind of like sort of worse cards for our deck, but cards that make a lot of tokens. I don't want to have that many of these because they only do one thing, and I don't like the idea of cards that only do one thing. But hey, they're here. If we Conqueror's Pledge or Increasing Devotion or even Lingering Souls, we're going to get enough tokens that we can Mass Polymorph into most of our guys, or all of our guys if we go with a slightly different build. Urborg I singled out because I wanted to talk about it individually. We have a mana doubler that doubles swamps in our deck. It's part of our win condition, part of our creatures. I guess I'll talk about it. Yeah, I'll talk about it now. So Urborg, we are running in here because we can go and get it with where Expedition Map can go and get it. A lot of our tutors can go and get it. And we're not running like a ton of swamps. We're running 10 swamps or lands that can go get swamps. I'd run more. I'd suggest running more if you have the resources, if you have the funds, because swamps are going to get doubled when we Mass Polymorph, as you'll see in a second. And I don't know if that was the best order to get into that card, but I wanted to remember to single it out because it's important. So the final step of building an EDH deck is just kind of like, okay, it needs to be 100 cards. What else appeals to me? Counterspell is a great card. These are in the category of either like slightly less good role players like Esper Charm. We don't really have much in the way of spot removal, but this can take care of enchantments at least. One thing you might want to add to this deck is like a couple more Wraths or a couple more pieces of spot removal. But yeah, Esper Charm's good. Neil Spellbomb is a little bit of graveyard hate that we can go get pretty easily. Spine of Ishsa is a cool card that actually interacts with our general quite nicely. It's 7 mana to destroy something, and if Spine would go to the graveyard, you can return it to your hand, or you have to return it to your hand. So we can turn this into a creature and fight with it, and if it gets removed, we get another shot at destroying something. So that's kind of neat. Sphinx's Revelation, I don't know if we really need it in this card, but everybody likes strong cards and gaining life. It's nice to have some life gain as an out. Okay, so now we get into the big stuff, like the big reasons why we're here. The creatures. It's kind of a strange group. It's a motley crew of guys. But I went with 7 because I wanted to not get everyone. this is like an intentionally bad move on my part because I don't want to build a combo deck that straight up wins instantly. The more aggressive version of this would be to cut these two goofy guys, cut this, and just run these three. These three are the main pieces of our combo. Palinchron is a creature that when it comes into play, you untap 7 lands. And you can return it to your hand by paying 4. And if you think about untapping 7 lands, that can get really good if your land's tapped for 2 mana. We are running 2 of the Ravnica common lands that tap for 2, the Karus or whatever they're called. But if you get enough lands that tap for 2 mana, you can have Palinchron. The cost of returning to your hand and casting it is 11. So if your land's tapped for 2 and you're untapping 7, that's a net gain of 3 mana, because 14. So that's infinite mana if you are doubling your mana somehow. So Palinchron is really good if we have a mana doubler out. Our mana doubler of choice is Cryptghast, who is going to cause all of our swamps to add an additional black. And Cryptghast has an additional feature of having the ability to extort, which means that every time we cast a spell, we gain life and each of our opponents loses life. Well, we gain life equal to the life they lose, but we don't care about the life gain. So this is kind of neat because a lot of decks run things like Exsanguinate to win with Palinchron, but we don't need to run Exsanguinate because Cryptghast exists now, which means we can just kill with the extort triggers. Like we can cast Palinchron 100 times and everybody dies, or 1 billion times and everybody dies. So this is kind of the combo. It does rely on Urbog being out, but that's why we run Rinskar Demon. The ideal situation is you haven't played your land yet for the turn when you cast Mass Polymorph, and you use Rinskar to go get Urborg, you play Urborg, and then you just go nuts with Palinchron. So it's a little bit, it needs like 7 or 8 lands to work, but it's once you get going, it's just a kill. So you might wonder, why are we running more creatures in the kill? We are running them because they're fun, and because we don't necessarily want to hit these. I'm having a little bit of difficulty actually deciding how aggressive how much of a kill I want this deck to be. I could cut these. I could really change the creature targets for Mass Polymorph. But for right now, we have Sphinx of Uthen, who is just like a good value creature. He comes into play, he draws cards. He's like a giant Muldrifter. He's great. We have Angel of Despair, a classic reanimation target. And we have Ashen Rider, which is essentially the same card for 1 more mana, but it exiles a permanent instead of destroying it. So these cards, let's say we Mass Polymorph for 3. We could get very lucky, and we could get our combo and kill people and make them upset. Or we could get Sphinx of Uthen, Ashen Rider, Angel of Despair, and it's just like for six mana, that's still really good, but it's not going to win the game on the spot. We're also running Iona, who I'm starting to think is less and less necessary. If Iona comes out, we name a color, and our opponent can't cast spells of that color. That's another way to win, and it's pretty good. But the thing about Iona is it doesn't really protect us from anything, because if we're gonna Mass Polymorph, people are just gonna people are gonna respond by killing our 1/1s or something like that. They're not gonna wait to see what we get before they decide if they're gonna play route, But those are the creatures that I have in there at the moment. If you wanted to be a kinder soul, you could cut Cryptghast, cut Palinchron, maybe cut the Runescarred, and definitely cut Iona, because Iona will just win against monocolored decks. And you could play Inkwell Leviathans, a big dumb creature. Sphinx of the Steel Wind is a kind of hard to kill creature that gains life and has Prot Red and Green and is cool. Mirror Battlesphere would also be an interesting choice because it makes tokens. So if you just drew this naturally, it is 5 creatures for the price of 1. So This is good on either side of the mass polymorph. So those are the things that you could do with mass polymorph. And again, there's like a million ways to do this where it just straight up kills people. And if you wanted to just straight up kill people, I strongly suggest playing as few creatures as possible. Like, if you can get it down to 2 in like a 5-color version, that'd be great. If you can, 3 is fine. Just make sure that if you want to kill people, just make sure it's as few creatures as possible, and you probably want to dip into green and build a completely different deck with a better general. But this is my version of the deck so far, and I hope you guys appreciate it. I hope that this was like insight into how to approach building an EDH deck. And if you want to see more of this, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your time. I'll see you later.